Hello and welcome to That British Homestead. Today I thought I'd go through how to start an allotment. My advice is if you get the phone call, doesn't matter what the lady says on the end of the phone or man or whoever it is, no matter what they say yes. Right? Like a job, I was always taught this in a job interview, right? No matter what the job interview said, it's like, can you speak Spanish? You're like, yes. I don't even know one word of Spanish, but like I'll figure it out later. Well, maybe not that extreme, but always say yes. So they'll probably phone you up and go, we've got an allotment for you, it's really overgrown, there's a bit of rubbish to clear, do you want it? Yes is the answer. You're not going to get a perfect, like you might do, but it's unlikely. It's very unlikely that you'll get an allotment that is absolutely pristine because the person would still be on the allotment. They wouldn't have been kicked off the allotment. So there's the point. My second plot was so badly looked after that nobody wanted it. And I used to be on my plot doing my stuff and the weed seeds would come over in a cloud, honestly, whilst I was over there, which is disheartening. So I ended up getting that allotment as well because nobody wanted it. It was really hard graft to get it the way it is today. It's taken so long. So it is important to make sure that you are, like you have that in the back of your mind, that it's going to be hard work and you're not going to get an immaculate allotment. Additionally, this is something that comes up quite a lot, especially when you talk to people in the allotment. There's no right or wrong way of doing an allotment, okay? Unless, once again, dynamite or sleeping on it, apparently. But most importantly, there's no like dig, no dig, who cares, organic, inorganic, like you do you. That's how I approach the allotment. There is a lot of people down the allotment, at least in my allotment, who are really passionate about gardening, and that's awesome. But it can be quite like off-putting or quite intimidating to some people when, for example, one of my friends, he has come from generations of farmers, okay, and he's like super good. He can grow like nobody's business, and he had a conversation with someone who was super no dig and was like, we're going to ban no dig at the allotment, you're not going to be able to do it. And he's like, I've never ever like grown anything without digging. It's so confusing to me. And you know, like everyone has an opinion, right? And it's one of them things that we have to take everybody. Do you know what? The amount of stuff I've learned from this bloke down the allotment is amazing. We grow things completely different, but he's a genius when it comes to seeds. So it's just, there's no wrong or right way. Everyone's doing everything the best they can, and that's wonderful. Beds, and I'm going to go into this in more detail, dig or no dig. And this can be, like before I had an allotment, I never thought it could be like a big debate, but it literally is something that people have big arguments about over the allotment. Obviously, it's because they're so passionate. I'm not saying they're like violent arguments. It's because people get so passionate about what they're doing that it can turn into a little bit of a debate over the allotment. That's why I just stay out of it. I'm like, you do you, awesome, great. Make sure that you put in paths is the biggest thing. Paths are so important. When you're a first time gardener, you're like, I'm gonna grow all of the vegetables everywhere, and then you're like, dude, how are you gonna get to the vegetables? How are you gonna bring a wheelbarrow over to the vegetables? You know, it's gonna be a right pain in the bum. So I recommend having quite wide paths so you don't have to crush any vegetables or worry about anything. Also, make sure that you are thinking about spacing. Don't squish everything in. If you go ahead and grow like carrots right next door to each other, everything germinates. First off, how did you do that? Please let me know. Then you have an issue with them not ever growing to maturity, and they'll look like toothpicks. So space things out. I know you'll think like, oh, it's like in my second allotment, I always grow squash there, and everyone's like, oh, you know, why are you wasting so much space? I'm like, just wait and see. And in like July, August, it's so full that I can barely move around. I'm like, that's why I give them so much space. You see what I mean? So it does depend on the plant, and the spacing is so important. Paths are so important. You need to get to and from. You don't want to be like squished in a narrow little lane and falling over into your plants or whatever it is. It's going to be a right pain in the bum. Once you've got that beautiful allotment plot, you've gone there and you're like, wow, this is amazing. This is the time where you get to dream, you get to plan. I love planning. I've actually spent the last week planning my 2 allotments and my back garden, mostly because, as you know, I'm not massively mobile at the moment, and it makes me feel like I'm connected to the gardening experience. So it's been really fun for me to do that, and I will show you some ideas that I have and what I'm doing on my allotment. I've actually started using a software, Grow More or something like that. Not sponsored or anything, I just decided to do it this year because I just want to be involved. So I went ahead and just did a load of stuff what my allotment would look like, which is really good. But before you start your plan, before you even go there, you go to the allotment and just see what you've inherited. Look at the plants. I inherited loads of rhubarb, a taberry bush, I got bay leaves, basilea, I got a load of raspberries, etc. So make sure you are looking and seeing what you have before you kill it all and dig it all up. Okay, so it's really super important that you do that. You'll probably get rhubarb. If your allotment plant's anything like ours, you'll have more rhubarb than you know what to do with. And then outline what you want to grow. Okay, what do you eat? Maybe you love carrots and broad beans and peas, which is awesome because they grow really well. Maybe you really want to grow all the potatoes for the year. You'll probably have an ambition at this point. I started off wanting to grow enough tomatoes to make tomato sauce. I'm laughing because I always talk about tomato sauce, but that was something that we really wanted to do. We do that now in absolute leaps and bounds. Okay, we eat loads of tomato sauce in the winter and in the summer, and we smash through it, and it's great. So that was something I wanted to do. Another thing I want to do is have enough potatoes, and then it goes on from there. Okay, so there'll probably be things that you like to eat and things you can't stand. You might be saying, oh, you know what, Nick, I absolutely hate sweet corn. Why do I want to grow that? Then don't grow it. There might be things that you want to try. You might be like, oh, I saw on, I don't know, on YouTube, this person grew Jerusalem artichokes. I've never tried one of them. I'd like to try it. Put a bed in. Okay, at this moment in time, it's a lot of experimentation. People always say grow what you eat, and I do think that's really important. Grow what you eat. However, what I grow and what I'd actually buy at the supermarket are 2 different things, because I really wouldn't buy asparagus just because I didn't grow up eating it. But I grew asparagus. I love asparagus. I eat asparagus. I wouldn't buy aubergines just because I didn't grow up eating them. But now I grow aubergines. I think they're like really expensive. Another thing that's like really expensive is courgettes. Like, I don't understand. Once you grow courgettes, you're like, oh my days, why am I doing all these courgettes? You're like throwing them out the window as you drive. Why are they so expensive in the shop? I don't understand. So yeah, look at things like, okay, these vegetables are super expensive. I'm going to grow those to cut down my shopping bill. Or perhaps you'll think, like, for example, I honestly believe that no potato in this world tastes better than a homegrown potato. That's my humble opinion. So therefore, I really want to grow potatoes. Even though they're quite a cheap crop to buy, I don't think taste-wise there's anything to really compare with them. I think that the actual potatoes that you grow are far superior. So that's something that I always think that is a really good thing. Another thing is tomato. Once again, tomato is not the most expensive thing in the world, but honestly, the tomatoes you get in the shop, I don't buy them anymore because they're gross. I just won't eat them. Whereas a homegrown tomato, to me, is absolutely amazing. So there'll be some things that you'll grow and you'll think, you know what, like sweet potatoes for me, was that worth it? I used a whole bed and I got like 2 sweet potatoes. Probably not. Whereas I could probably grow French beans there, and my daughter loves French beans and she eats a lot of French beans. Would that be worth it? Yeah, French beans are quite expensive and they honestly don't have the same quality value. Also, you need to think about, what are you actually passionate about? Do you want to grow all year round? Do you want to grow in the summer and take the winter off and do as little work as possible in the winter, because you do need to turn your beds around and cover them and stuff like that? But maybe you don't want to be going out there, you know, and harvesting in the winter. Maybe you do. Maybe you have this fantasy, and I know I did, about harvesting. We used to harvest all of our Christmas dinner on Christmas Eve, and it was a tradition for years and years, and my partner would always go down there going, oh god, what if the vegetables aren't there? Well, every year. And then bless him, I finally gave in and did it a week before, so he wasn't so stressed. Or a few days before, I should say, because the Brussels sprouts, I like them fresh. But yeah, maybe you have that sort of idea. That's fine as well. Just see what you want to do and research. This is the time that you're like researching, and coming up with all of these ideas. You could even do this before you even get that call and say, yes, you've got it. I know I did, and I planned all of the stuff that I was going to do and really lived in that fantasy for a while. You need to think about what do you need to want to plant, when do you need to plant it. Seed packets have a really great sort of dates on it. Can you start stuff at home? That is a great way of really accelerating the growth, because you can go ahead and plant out little plug plants in May and really get things off to a flying start. That's what I tend to do. Or is there like, what beds are you going to use for carrots? What beds are you going to use for parsnips? Maybe you want to grow the world's biggest parsnip. But how do you do that? Research it. There is a whole entire group of people that grow just large vegetables at their allotment. There are a load of people that just want to grow beautiful vegetables and go down to the local agricultural event that happens in the summer and put their vegetables in and get medals for them. That's like a whole thing. So there's loads of things you could be really super passionate about within the growing community, which is super cool. You also need to think, when are you going to be harvesting? If all your harvests come in June, July, August, but you take most of July and August and go on holiday, is it the right time to plant things that you're not going to be there for? You see what I mean? Perhaps you can get someone to look after them and give them the free vegetables that are ready to harvest. I don't know, but it could be something in the back of your mind. You're thinking, right, I need to make sure that my tomatoes go in super early so that I can make sure that I have enough in June, you know, whatever. Also, a good thing to research is pests. You will have a lot of pests and diseases down the allotment. Sadly, if your allotment's anything like ours, 70 years old, and it's been absolutely abused, no one's been putting things back into the soil, and a lot of people have been growing things and letting the pests infest. Well, not letting, but they do infest. Everything knows where to eat, and sadly, as soon as you start planting things out in your allotment, you're ringing the ding and the bell. So you do need to know how to keep pigeons off, how to tackle butterflies, how to sort out a sawfly. Can't remember how to say that, etc. It has to be like something you know. This is a great time to research. Another great thing to plan, are you going to have a water butt? How are you going to conserve water? It's really important, not only because it's good for the environment, but more importantly, it's really good for the plants. It's actually better than tap water or city water. So that's a good thing to think about. Another thing is compost. Compost is super expensive to buy, but you can make it free of charge on your allotment. You just need to find a place to go ahead and put that. So planning that all out is a great idea. Be realistic, okay? You're not going to be you know, Alan Titchmarsh day one if you've never grown anything. So be realistic. If you are waiting, then go ahead and try to grow things in your small garden, in your balcony, on your windowsill, so you have a little bit of knowledge. So you're not going in and thinking, Jesus, how do you germinate a seed. It's okay if you do, just be super patient with yourself. This is a learning curve. You need, what, 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything, okay? So if you're on hour 1, you're not going to be as good as you are on hour, I don't know, 5,000, okay? So you've just got to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room to make sure that you understand that not everything you touch is going to blossom and grow. If it does, then tell me how, because I know that in my career gardening, not everything I've touched has blossomed and grown. Don't overwhelm yourself. It's perfectly okay to cover everything and then go ahead and do one bed at a time. That is absolutely fine. No one's going to judge you on that. You should have a little bit of leeway in your contract that says so much of your allotment should be cultivated in so much time. So make sure that you follow that, obviously, but don't overwhelm yourself. Ask for help, ask for advice. You're probably sitting there with your neighbours, might have been there for, like, my neighbour on my side, he has been gardening in his allotment for 20 years. He is an expert when it comes to most pests, basically everything when it comes to allotmenting. So I go ahead and ask him, and the first time I grew peas over there, I was like, what pests affect peas? What do I need to do to protect them? And he was happy to tell me, because these people love gardening, so they're very, very passionate about talking about their gardens. So don't feel like you're bothering them. They absolutely love it. Another thing you want to do is go over there a little and often. If you leave everything to the last minute, it's going to be super stressful. If you go over there and spend a whole weekend, leave it a couple of months and go over there again, everything's going to be weedy and going to be very difficult to look after. Once a week is a great way to start. And just look at your routine. In the summer, I like to go down to the allotment super early in the morning before anyone's there, and I spend about an hour and a half down the allotment sorting my plot out, basically. Okay, so I do weeding, I do all of the all the really boring jobs that I don't want to waste on the weekend. And then at the weekend, I'd go down there for a couple of hours. Normally I get up super early and my family's still asleep. So I'd go down the allotment, check on the chickens, normally feed the chickens, sort them out, and do like harvesting or whatever I need to do that day. And when the weather gets even better, you can spend even longer down there. It's great. Bring a picnic, bring the kids, and it's a lovely day out. My daughter loves playing with the chickens, so having chickens really does help. They're the best babysitters. Another big thing is when you get an allotment, it can have quite a lot of rubbish on it. Removing the rubbish can be a bit of a pain in the bum, but you can go ahead and sack it all up and take it over the dump in your car. That is probably the best way of doing it. Every so often, people do get skips down the allotment, but they can be super costly, so bear that in mind. And also you need to be there to open up and shut the gates so that the tip man can come in, etc. So be really realistic when you're thinking about how much time you have to dedicate to the allotment and how much help you're going to get. The person that had my allotment before me, my first allotment, he was quite elderly. When he took on his allotment, he was like, oh, my son's going to help me. The issue he had was his son had absolutely no interest in growing anything. He didn't want to go down there, so he didn't go down there. And the issue is it might be your absolute dream, but your family might absolutely hate it. And it's a little bit like me, okay? I sometimes get help down the allotment, probably about once a year, but most of the time they have no interest. They'd rather stay in bed than get up and come and help me down the allotment. That's fine, I don't push them. But just be realistic at how much time you have and how much time they have. Saying that, there are quite a few people down our allotment who share plots. So for example, there were two ladies and they really struggled with their plots. It was just full of weeds all the time. They used to come down, really smash it, and then feel really disheartened because it was quite a lot of time that they spent not being able to have their allotments because it's too weedy. And then if you go down there and you do like hours and hours of work, leave it a few months, come back, it's full of weeds. It's so disheartening. So instead of them having two struggling plots, they actually ended up getting rid of one plot and moving in to the same plot, and now their plot is much, much better because there's two people able to work on it. So they will share the produce and share the cost, which is really nice. some people start out having a plot together. Two gentlemen who have moved down my allotment have done that. It's amazing. They're doing so well. It looks fantastic. But it also means that when one's on holiday, the other one exchange. So there's a lot of things like that. There's some mum and daughters. The daughters have one plot and the mum has one plot, and they help each other out. There's lots of families that have plots down the allotment, which is awesome, but it does allow them to have, you know, that more flexibility of who's going down the allotment, especially if they're all very, very passionate about gardening. But you can't expect someone who absolutely hates gardening to go down there and do the work. You see what I mean? Unless you're paying them. So in conclusion, if you think that you have about 1 to 2 hours a week to really like go down there and smash it, some people go down the allotment, and I'm not joking, they spend all day drinking tea and chatting, and it's such a lovely social club for them, and that's what they go down the allotment for. They might grow the odd carrot here, there and everywhere, but they mostly go down there for that. That's awesome too, but really you want about 1 to 2 hours a week to absolutely smash it. And the first year is going to be the hardest because the weeds are going to be really battling you. So you've got your first allotment. What condition is it going to be in? It's going to be very weedy. It might be full of rubbish. Be careful, there might be glass. My allotment had a lot of broken glass on it because of winds, etc. like that. We saw the winds this week, yeah, they were madness. Just remember that you can clear. What I do is go down there, try to clear as much as possible and cover it in black plastic and do it little bit by little bit by little bit. But just remember that you want to do that very, very soon as you get on, because you might not be able to see the weeds back at home, but your plot neighbours can. It's very disheartening when you see all of those weed seeds go over your plot, okay? It's just one of them things that you kind of want to get on top of. And once you've done that, it's so much easier to put out your plan and really understand what's going on. Remember also, although it's horrible seeing all those weeds, especially stinging nettles, I hate them, but it means that your soil is super fertile, so that is a really good bonus. Another issue you're going to have, what you could have down the allotment, is that pests and diseases are absolutely smashing it on the allotment. They are very, very likely to affect your allotment because, like I said, lots of people have been growing down there for generations and have not amended the soil, or because there's all of that crop being grown together, that's where the pests know it's ringing a dinner bell, so they know it's going to be there. And also you might not get your allotment at the season that you want it, but you know what, it doesn't matter what season you get your allotment, that's when you're starting. I got one in August and then again in October. August is probably the worst time to get it because everything's already, the season's kind of over. So I grew a lot of brassicas that year. And then in October, it was kind of like too late to grow anything really. So I was clearing and getting ready for the winter. There are also going to be so many ups and downs of having an allotment. I've had a lot of things that I've really been passionate about put in and they've done really badly. Sweet potatoes, carrots, and I've had a lot of pest damages, like my first year growing cucumbers were eaten by rats. This year I had a lot of rat damage on my squash plants, but really being like, okay, how can I learn from this? Okay, I've done that wrong, how can I learn from that? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing right? And really evaluating yourself. That's how I get through it, and it makes me really cheery that I'm like, okay, I'll never make that mistake again. Let's see what happens next year. So it's learning from your mistakes is a really powerful gift. But most importantly, if you invest enough time down the allotment, digging, weeding, etc., and researching all the stuff you want to do, you're going to do very well. You just need to make sure that you are very respectful to yourself, okay? You're not going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. So after a little while, you will get better. You just have to be patient with yourself. So we've decided what we're going to grow. We've decided how to grow, etc. But are you going to grow organically or inorganically? That is the question. It's another really, really like debated topic down the allotment. There are some people that absolutely swear by slug pellets, some people that are just insulted by the mere mention of chemicals. So I'm going to go through a little bit of what I know about gardening. I personally garden organically. And that's a multitude of reasons. Really weird, but one of the biggest reasons I garden organically is because I bake sourdough bread. And I know you're thinking, oh yeah, logical jump there. And I found that using organic flour helped me get the yeast that I needed to make really bubbly sourdough bread. And honestly, that after that I was like, what's on the inorganic one that stops that from happening as quick? And that's where I went down the rabbit hole. So yeah, I don't mind what you're going to do, okay? But that's the way I do it, okay? So what people say is, if you really like care about the environment and everything like that, garden organically. I'm not saying that. I'm saying do you. When I first started gardening, I was like, I looked like James Bond. I was like, I have a job, and used to spray everything, okay? I think a lot of people that start out do that because it's really hard to keep things alive. You don't want to put loads of effort in and let half your crops die. I understand that. I'm not here to judge, okay? Don't think I am. But these are some fun facts about gardening and some of the benefits of organic gardening. So you can reduce the amount of chemicals on your food. That's a big one for me. My daughter actually had an allergic reaction to pesticides, so I do worry about what she eats, probably more than she does. She's completely okay eating chocolate spread and chocolate for the rest of her life, but I do worry about what she's putting in her tiny little body and things like that. Managing pests, weeds, and diseases can be a little bit challenging, but there's lots of tips and tricks that you can find online for organic methods to reduce the amount of threats you have, netting, etc., that can work equally as well as inorganic methods. Also, because you're gardening organically, you tend to put a lot more care in your soil and look after your soil. That came out wrong. If you are gardening organically, you tend to amend the soil quite heavily with organic matter, which is improving the overall structure of the soil. Negatives, obviously, expense. It is more expensive to grow organically. I personally don't buy organic seeds. Well, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I kind of buy whatever's available, but I do like to buy organic fertilizers, organic soils, organic compost, and it does add up. So there is a big thing about perhaps even skipping that. Remember, this is your rule. If you think to yourself, you know what, I don't want to buy organic compost, then don't. No one's making you. If you're thinking, do you know what, I have to buy organic seeds, okay, do that then. Just remember, you're not going to be selling them on, and you don't have to certify yourself as organic. So it's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with, okay? But that's the way I choose to do it, and I'm not saying it's any better than anyone else's. Certain techniques to look after your plants. For example, butterflies, you could go in there and totally spray it all with pesticide, and any butterfly that looks at your cabbage will die. You could use BT, which is it's a nematode that will actually disrupt the digestive system of insects, but does not have any effect on us. So you could use that, or you could net it. Netting obviously takes a little bit longer, but you can reuse it every year. I choose to net because in my allotment, it's not just the butterflies I worry about, it's the pigeons. The pigeons eat so much brassicas. I don't know how my pigeons fly. There must be little fat things that couldn't, they're trying to get away. But yeah, that's why I go ahead and do that. But sadly, if you do garden organically, there will be some years that you just lose your crops, or you lose some of your crops, so they get really super damaged. Some years you'll be like, where are all the butterflies at? But some years they'll be there, and there will just be pandemics of them. So it is really challenging, but I really like a challenge personally. I like to challenge myself. So if it's something you're into, there's no right or wrong answer there. Another one, I've already kind of touched upon this, dig in or not to dig. This is the question. It can be really debated. I actually get really nervous talking about this sort of stuff because I hate offending people. Like in real life, this is real life, but you know what I mean? I'm just not one of them people that are really controversial. So, dig or not to dig. My nan, okay, who taught me how to garden, she dug all the time and she loved it. But sadly, she had to give up gardening when her hips got really bad because she was no longer able to dig, okay. I was born I have terrible hips now. Obviously now I'm pregnant, it's different, but even before I was pregnant I have terrible pain in my hips. So if I were to dig all day and you do that motion of like digging down, I don't think I'd be able to garden. There's a lot of people who are in the same sort of position as me that have medical conditions or perhaps physiological conditions that really limit their ability to dig. Okay, we're all different. That's why I choose to do no dig. That's one of the main reasons I do no dig. I understand it's wheelbarrowing and stuff, but that's so much easier for me to do because it's a different movement. It's all on the upper body strength. So I don't struggle with that as much, but I really struggle with the motions of digging. So that's why I go ahead and do no dig. So it's each their own, isn't it? What is no digging? No digging is no rotation even, no forking, no nothing, no digging in whatsoever. The only thing you're doing is making little holes to put plants in. And then you cover the soil with organic matter and then you plant directly into that. That is basically the method of no dig. There are some really famous YouTubers that do no dig that give really interesting like different scales of growing with no dig methods. You've got no till gardeners and you've got Charles Downing. He's amazing. He's like the grandfather of no dig. He is pretty cool. So yeah, he's a really big name in no dig, and he'll take you all the way through the really nitty-gritties of growing by this method. Why do no dig? Maybe you have a health condition like I was telling you about, or perhaps you think of some of the benefits of no dig gardening, which would be very exciting, and we're going to go through them now. So the structure of the soil is actually absolutely, think of it like a tapestry of like wormholes, and you've got loads of microorganisms in there, different levels, right? And they're happy in their little level of the soil, right? And they do loads of things like break down organic matter and produce soil and do tons and tons of things. There is so much life in a teaspoon of soil. Okay, good soil, obviously. If you went to like some places, there'd be no life in it at all. So it's really important to look after that. My favourite animal actually is a tardigrade, which is a water bear. They're adorable, look them up. So I really like to have that idea that I'm not damaging them. So it's interesting to think about. It basically improves overall diversity of your soil, which allows your plants to have more access to nutrition, because these little blighters are super good at taking things that are not bioavailable, meaning they're not able to be gotten by the plant or used by the plant. They're making them to be in a form that can be used by the plant. There's tons of scientific evidence that actually support this, which is outlined absolutely everywhere online, which is super cool. And it's just making sure that biodiversity is right up so that you can have the best outcome from your plants. You can walk on the beds as well, right? That's one of my favourite advantages on it. Whereas a tilled bed, you can't walk on because it compresses the soil again. Whereas a no-dig soil tends to be more spongy, so you can go ahead and walk on it. Over time, there's less pests like slugs in a no-till bed, because the structure is super good. But once again, you've got to make sure that your bed is clear, right, of debris and stuff like that, to make sure that there are no pests. You don't have to water as much because the top layer of compost works out as a mulch, so therefore it represses or reduces the amount of evaporation from the soil. I really like the saying that Mother Nature is very shy and she likes to be covered. So for example, when you have a tilled bed, you do get a lot of soil erosion, which leads to moisture loss and nutrient loss of the soil. And this is another thing that's super well documented, especially in farmlands, etc. That's why they use things like fertilizers, because it's very difficult to keep the nutrients in the soil when it's tilled. Additionally, it also allows carbon to be locked in to the soil. It's called sequestered carbon, and it doesn't release carbon. Tilling does release carbon, which goes back into the atmosphere, whereas no dig tends to keep the carbon into the soil. And if you have soil like very heavy clay soil, we are on London clay, you are able to get a better soil structure over time without having to do raised beds, which is very exciting for me. There are some negatives to no dig though, and I'm not going to lie to you. They need a large amount of organic matter, particularly on the first year. The first year you're lying down with cardboard and you put a thick layer of compost or horse manure that's well rotted, etc. down. So it can be quite costly. And the more compost you need to use, the more expensive it is, unless you are able to find somewhere that you can get the compost for free. There's a lot of shoveling and wheelbarrowing. Coming up to autumn, I am literally just barrowing every day. Every day I'm shoveling. So yeah, there is that to take into account really. It can be super challenging for some people. Like I said, I've got an issue with my hips, so it makes it really hard to dig. Some people have issues that for example, my mum has an issue with her shoulder and she really struggles with carrying the wheelbarrow, so that's something she loves coming down and helping. She comes down lots of weekends and helps out, but she can't do that just because she's got an injury on her shoulder. Also, like I told you, no dig can be quite a debate on the allotment, and I know that there's been a few times where, because we get reviewed by the committee, that a lot of the community don't really understand no dig, and you can get some negative feedback being like, you haven't dug. But that's just something, it's just something they're just not used to. So it can be quite a kind of parallel to what they're used to, and some people can quite, you can rub them the wrong way, which obviously I'm not there to do. Another big thing is when you move, I forgot what it's called. It's up to then. No digging is no rotisserie. Oh, chicken, yum. Rotation even.